Hey there, fourth graders. Today we are on lesson 9.3 and we are talking about equivalent fractions and decimals. I am looking at page 508 right now as we get started off. This first portion, writing 6/10, writing an equivalent fraction, we've done a lot of work with this, but it helps us really to see why what we were talking about yesterday really works, okay? So let's look at this. We've got 6/10 is equivalent to how many 1/100ths? And so this is the same setup that we've been working with whenever we find equivalent fractions. This is one of those deals where I say, if we do it to the bottom, we also have to do it to the top. Okay, so I'm asking first, how do I get from a denominator of 10 to a denominator of 100? I would have to multiply 10 by 10. So I'm going to put my 10 right here, and this is where it lies. This is where I say, okay, if I did it to the bottom, where else do I need to do it? And you always come back with the top. So I got to put it up here or the numerator. All right, so I've done 10 times 10 equals 100. And now I'm going to do 10 times 6, or 6 times 10, excuse me. And that would be equal to 60. So you can see that 6/10 is equivalent to 60 100ths. So we're just talking equivalent fractions here. That shouldn't be too terribly daunting. And if you were to fill out these models here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then same thing here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you would be able to see that the model sizes are exactly the same, and we've filled in roughly exactly the same amount in each one of those models. I'm going to put my 60 right here. And you can actually physically see with the models that those two are equivalent. And you can see right over here off to the side, on this side over here, after doing the work, why they are equivalent. If you multiply your numerator and denominator by the same number, no matter what that number is, you will be coming up with an equivalent fraction to your original fraction. All right, now let's relate it down here to our decimals. So if we have 6/10, I hear tenths as my label, which also tells me that the tenths spot is where I'm going to put that 6. So I'm going to put it in right there. And this goes back 2 days when I was talking about how if I put this 0 after the 6, I said it does not change the value. That means it is equivalent to 6/10. That means I could put another 0 right there and have 600 thousandths. And it is the same equivalent value as 6/10. And I could go on and on and on, and they would all be equivalent. However, we are not going to cross that bridge. We're going to stop at this hundredths place value. So I'm going to get rid of those zeros, and I see 60 hundredths means the exact same thing as 6/10. They are equivalent. There is no difference in the value of that number. They are equivalent. So you can have the 0 there or not. Now today's lesson, it's going to be really important that you pay attention to the instructions, how it asks you to write it down, whether it's asking you to write it in tenths or hundredths. You're going to need to pay really close attention to our instructions that are given. But the way they say it right here kind of makes sense. There's 6/10 and 0 hundredths. So you just are putting the 0 in the hundredths place. That's all there is to it. And so now I flipped over to our next page. I'm on page 508, and we're talking equivalent decimals. Same thing that we just finished with there, talking about how 6/10 is the same thing as 60 hundredths, which means you can work in that way where you start with the 6/10 and then add a 0 on, but you can also work the opposite direction, and that's what this question right here is asking us to do. It's asking us to look at this 30 hundredths. When I see that 0 in the hundredths place value, that's the place value I'm going to name. And it says to show it in the place value chart. 0.3 0. Now, like what I was just talking about, do I need that 0 there for me to understand the value of this 3? There are 3 tenths and 0 hundredths. So 30 hundredths is equivalent to 3, I didn't need to put a decimal there, 3 tenths. So 30 hundredths can be written as 0.3. Anytime there's a 0 after that 3, we can drop it off and it can have the exact same value. So just some more language for us down here. The way you would write this, 30 hundredths, or the way you would say this anyhow, is 30 hundredths. Then we've got hundredths already as our label. And we can just put our 30 right here. So 30 hundredths is 30 hundredths. 30 hundredths written as a fraction now. Okay, we've been working on getting those fractions over to decimals, but decimals back to fractions. It's just the same way you would hear it. 30 hundredths. What does that sound like? It'll look like as a fraction. Hundredths would be our denominator. So 100 goes in the bottom. And then how many hundredths? 30. Okay, so it works really well both ways. Now, at the beginning of this lesson, we did an equivalent fraction using multiplication, but we also know from our previous lessons that we can work the other direction as well. We can do it using division. So if we have a decimal, or excuse me, not a decimal, a fraction that is in the hundredths place value, and it asks us to write the equivalent fraction as a tenth, or with a denominator of 10, then all we have to do now is think about, well, 100 divided by what would equal 10? Now, if that division tricks your brain a little bit, you know you're trying to go from 100 to 10, you can also ask yourself, well, 10 times what would give me 100? Okay, and your answer there is 10. 10 times 10 gives me 100. So you're working the other direction. Now we also know when we divide a value of 10, if I do it on the bottom, the denominator, I also have to do it on the top, the numerator. Now, like I was saying, we know when we divide by a value of 10, we can look at how many zeros we have. I see I've got a 0 here and a 0 there. And I can just mark them off and I end up with 3. Or I can look at this question. So I see 30 divided by 10. And if that division really tricks your brain a little bit, you can go the opposite direction. You say, well, okay, 30 divided by 10. Well, 10 times what would give me 30? And if that helps your brain along a little bit better, you can give yourself a 3 right there. Either way works. You just have to know when to use which method. Now this page, I flipped on over to our next page, and this page is going to be a little bit more similar to what your homework will look like. So I wanted to go through it on this page just really briefly here with you before I let you go into your homework. So number 2 through 4 here, our instructions are to write the number as hundredths in fraction form and decimal form. So we have to convert it in 2 different ways. So it's really important that we're paying attention to what the instructions are asking us to do here. So we got 7 tenths. First, since it's already in a fraction, I'm going to go ahead and change it into my equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. So zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to do my setup. 7 tenths times what over what would give me, I'm going to get rid of that because that's really close to that underline there before. A little bit lower. Okay. Would give me 100 as my new denominator. And I know that 10 times 10 is 100. If I do it in the denominator, I also will need to do it in the numerator. And 7 times 10 would give me 70. So there's my first answer. I've got 70 100ths, and please remember that this blue line down here is not a fraction bar. So 71/100ths is one of my answers, and then the other question asks me to write it in decimal form. Okay, so I'm going to and. Okay, 70/100ths. I'm going to write my 70. That 0 goes in the hundredths place value, and I'm putting my decimal right in front of it because I don't have a whole number attached to it. And I'm going to put a 0 right there in my whole number spot just to hold that spot. And there you have it. That's all she wrote on that problem right there. Let's look at this one right here. It's still same thing. It needs to be written in decimal and fraction format with a denominator of 100. So this 5/10 is how this is read. 5/10. I can easily say, well, I'll just add a 0 onto the end of that. That would make it 50/100ths, right? And that's all there is to it. So I have 0.50 as 50/100ths. Now you listen to the way that that sounds, 50/100ths, then I can do hundredths as my denominator, and there are 50 of them. So 50/100ths works out really nice. I'll put a comma between those. And then our last one here, 3/10 is going to be exactly the same as how you would solve it on number 2 there. Okay, so there's a couple examples for you there. Please remember you are welcome to pause or look back or rewind or anything as you're going through these if I am moving too fast for you. I'm going to do just a couple of them in the opposite direction here where we have 40/100ths. We have all 5, 6, and 7 are in hundredths, and now they need to be written as tenths in fraction form and decimal form. That means I'm looking for 2 answers again. So I have 40/100ths here. Well, I have a 4 in the tenths place value, and I do not need that 0 there because it does not change the value of my number, and this can be written as 0.4 as 4/10. Okay, that's my decimal format, but I still need to do my fraction format. So put my comma there, put my fraction bar line, and I know I'm going to see this number right here. I see 4/10, and if I just read that 4/10 and then write it exactly the way it sounds, I have 10 as my denominator, and I have 4 of them. I have 4/10, and that's all there is to that. My last example I will give you is 80/100ths in fraction format. So I'm going to get it from 80/100ths to 8/10 is what I need to get it down to. I've got 80/100ths. And I'm trying to get it down to tenths as my denominator. So 10 is going to be my new denominator. So I'm dividing because I'm moving it from a bigger number to a smaller one. So getting 100 to 10, I'm going to divide 100 by 10. A little hint for you guys, we're only working with hundredths and tenths, so this will always be the case. We're always either multiplying or dividing by 10 in this lesson today. All right, so if I do it to the denominator, I also must do it to the numerator. 80 divided by 10, okay? Well, if it doesn't make sense to you to look at it division-wise, you can say, well, 10 times what would give me 80? You should end up with 8. One more little trick of the trade that you can do is say I see 1 0 up here and 2 zeros down here. I can cancel out 1 0 on top and bottom and get 8/10. Okay, if that makes sense to your brain, go ahead and use it. If that adds confusion, don't. All right, so 8/10 is one of my answers, and the next answer is going to be 8/10 written as a decimal. And so I've got my 0 and I've got my decimal. I know that I don't have a whole number attached to it. I've got my decimal, and 8/10. Tenths is my label or place value, and that means that 8 goes in that place value. So I'm going to put my 8 right there, and that is all there is to it. So that is what you will be doing on your homework today. You will just need to do numbers 2 through 8 on the front of your homework. You are welcome to do the back. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.